Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Smart Coffee Break, the productivity podcast brought to you by Nestlé Coffee Partners. Nowhere is team performance more important than in the life sciences, where innovating at speed has been part of the fight against coronavirus. We know that teamwork is essential in every business sector, but how do we optimize it? And what can office design do to support? Simon, welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you here. First of all, tell us a little bit about your role at GSK. How is workplace strategy and design managed?
I am the workplace design and change lead for GSK, and I have accountability for all of our workplaces. So that's commercial offices and also scientific workplaces, laboratories, and that will be across the globe. Really, the role is in two parts. One is really concerning project delivery. So we have a regional structure. All of our projects are actually delivered in country by a local team. So when our delivery is closest to the point of need. But the actual strategy, what is our workplace standard, that is actually developed centrally by my team here in the UK. And we have oversight and we get involved and provide guidance to all those regional projects.
Tell me about what's happening currently inside the company, because over the last 18 months with COVID, there's been a huge amount of change. How is team interaction changing? How are you composing and assembling teams within GSK? And what changes are you making for the future?
I think, like most organizations, we've been on a real journey in the past 18 months. Really from the beginning, if the world was turned on its head, everybody in the whole organization was working remotely. Large portions of the business have now returned to the office, but in different ways, and we're still experimenting, we're still piloting. I think what was most interesting was that when people were working remotely, on their own, it was extremely difficult to actually innovate. How do you actually call up a bunch of people, bounce off ideas, and do that on screen? We developed a few ideas, we used some technology, and it became quite structured, and we learned from that. So that was quite interesting. And one of the benefits of online brainstorming is that you actually ensure that everybody actually contributes. So even the introverts who are in the virtual room, there's a point where you actually stop and say, tell me what you're thinking. And sometimes that gets lost when you're in a room and there's lots of activity. Now, I would say that we've learned from that, but equally, we've also learned that being with people makes ideas much easier. So we still want to actually structure our teams so that we bring people together. We still think that's key to innovation. Yes, there are things we can do online, but in the ideal world, we like to get people in the same room. And that's when the magic begins to happen. It's made us think about our office portfolio. We're now pursuing a less desk solution. So we're now saying, why are you coming into the office? If I need to write a report, if I'm running some administration, I don't need to be in the office. If I'm going into the office, it's to be with people.
So do you have any formula for this new world of hybrid work where some of the work that was previously done at the desk in the office is now going to be done at home or in a third space?
Well, GSK is really quite a collegiate organization, so we very rarely mandate anything. Our view is that we do things because it's a very good idea, and if it's a very good idea, you can persuade people. So yes, that means an awful lot of conversations and an awful lot of negotiation, but the way we approach the coming into the office is that we ask people to say, what does the business need? We would like it if you were to come into the office probably up to half the week, but it's not an absolute diktat. It's really a question of what works for you, because the company actually trusts our staff. So there's a high level of trust in the individual to do what they think is right. Our staff respond very well to this. There's still a high drive for people to come into the office, and it's all about that balance now. There's a real benefit that people can work remotely in a way that suits them and actually organize their business life, that they come in to be with their colleagues and actually do the things that they want to do. Now, and we're just finding that we don't need a heavy hand to organize that. And we really just set a few guardrails, to actually just make sure that you're not coming in to sit at a desk for 8 hours. That is not the right approach anymore.
And do you think you will be getting rid of office space, rationalizing or redesigning it for different needs? What's on the horizon in terms of what you're doing with your space?
Do we need the office? Yes, absolutely. So we as an organization, we do not see that going away. Do we need to reshape it? Yes, I think we do. I mean, it's an evolving standard. Our workplace has always changed. So whether it's responding to technology, whether it's responding to new ways of working, the thing is not set in stone. So our workplace will always continue to change. So we talked about a 50-50 model, people working remotely for up to 50% of the week. But also when we get them into the office, we're saying that at least 50% of that environment now, 50% of the built environment should actually be reshaped as collaborative workspace. So we are actively trying to break the relationship with the desk. So we want people to come into the office to be with people. We want them to bounce ideas. We want them to learn. We want them to learn from others. And we really don't see the need for people to be desk bound in ways that they once were.
In terms of teamwork, and you allude to the fact that you're trying to move people away from sitting at a desk all day, which is in some respects the anathema of teamwork. There was an amazing experiment that attracted the attention right across the workplace industry just before the pandemic, in which GSK developed something called the Workplace Performance Hub. I think you took a former skincare lab in your Brentford HQ and you repurposed it and you conducted a series of interesting research experiments. Can you tell us a little bit about the context to the Workplace Performance Hub and what actually happened?
We wanted to understand the impact of the built environment on the way we work. So as you described, we took an old skincare lab and we stripped it out and we refitted it out as an office. And it became, if you like, a controlled environment. It was off-grid, so it wasn't on the GSK network, which meant we were allowed to do things that we probably wouldn't normally do corporately. We invited about 50 of our colleagues to come and work in that space. And we just said, look, just go about your normal business. Everything you would normally do, you just continue. And we're going to passively measure the impacts. So we put in lots of sensors. So we knew in terms of which pieces of equipment or which desk or which work setting would be used. We put in things which actually measured the environment. So what was the air quality? What were light levels? We put in an adaptive sound system. We measured CO2. And I think what is also interesting, apart from the physical environment, we also invited our colleagues to use wearables. So they each had a device which would actually measure their resting heart rate, the number of steps they would take, and also their sleep outside of the office. And then in tandem with all of that, every week we asked them to run a cognitive performance test. And this was where we actually measured decision-making, memory, and distractibility. So an awful lot of data. And then what we did was we let our colleagues go about their business, and then we would make one change to the environment, and then we would measure the impact. So if we were to increase lighting levels, did that have an effect on people's cognitive performance? And the answer was yes, it did. And as you described, we also looked at teamwork. One of the first things we did when we fitted out the office is we just dramatically reduced the number of desks. So we put in 30% of our normal quota of traditional desks, but we put in a lot of other workspaces, other places where work could happen. And one of those was actually an open plan meeting area. And what we found was in this controlled environment that the teams loved it. They started to use it for Scrum meetings. There was a huge screen which was connected to a WebEx. The guys would come in the morning, they would literally dial up on the WebEx, they'd talk to their colleagues in the US, and they'd set the agenda for today. Today, here's the problem we're going to solve. And about 30 people, standing room only, would gather in that space. They'd then actually parcel off different tasks and they'd break up. They would then disperse in the hub. They'd work in pockets of 3, pockets of 5. They'd solve a problem. And then they'd run back to the screen and shout, "Done it. We've actually moved this idea forward. Here's what we've done." The guys on the other side of the Atlantic would take those results. They would then progress them, and it would go back and forth. And what we found was that this mushroomed. They'd prop open the door on the performance hub, and they invited their colleagues. So suddenly, instead of the 30 people who were in the meeting, there might be 50, there might be 60. There was standing room only, and it was really quite amazing to watch. But their innovation cycles, actually dramatically improved by about 20%. They were turning ideas around much quicker. They were solving problems, and there was a real buzz in the environment. And that to me was a real lesson about how you can shape the environment to actually help teams work in very different ways.
So these lessons that you've learned, it sounds absolutely amazing that you've actually measured and monitored and put together the alchemy of how people work together and how they can be more effective. How have you applied the lessons of the Workplace Performance Hub?
We always have a number of projects which are running at any one time. And, wherever we can, we use those projects to pilot new initiatives, new ideas. I think with the benefit of the Workplace Performance Hub, we had a lot of new ideas and different ways of thinking. So we then began to roll that out on a project level. Pretty much most of the ideas, the learnings from the hub were actually then incorporated in our workplace standards. So we have a new generation of workplace standard. And things, just really as simple as, we found that, in an enclosed meeting room, after about 20 minutes, 4 or 5 people come into the room, they shut the door behind them, and CO2 levels would spike. And, it would actually go above 1,000 particulates per million. And that had a real impact on people's ability to think and perform. So, as a standard now on all our projects, we configure our fresh air to CO2 levels. So previously it would have been to temperature. Now that very simple switch in controls, it doesn't cost us much, but that is now a standard that we adopt across the world.
What are the amenities that you have to put into the workplaces in order to support that consumerized model? What role, for example, does food and drink play in that?
You have to build a complete ecosystem. We're moving away from, the office as this central production where you have rows and rows of desks. We're now accepting that work happens anywhere. And we're accepting that actually people need space to actually relax. Just because you're sitting in a coffee bar, and having a good quality coffee, you're talking to a colleague, doesn't mean you're not talking about work. And it's also important that you get that mental release from the workplace. So food and beverage is hugely important. So you actually want to keep people within the environment. So you actually want to give them the facilities that make them comfortable. So hydration is important, good quality coffee, good food offer. You need somewhere where actually there's, rest, recreation. You need spaces where actually there is no technology, a library environment or an outside terrace where they can just go and be themselves without the pressure of, I must be producing something. And to be honest, it yields results. What we found is that in terms of productivity, the ability to switch off, think in a different way, and then come back to a problem, it yields real benefits. It's actually far more productive.
What advice would you give to other companies about how they should manage their workplace, especially in terms of the meeting experience, which often impedes effective and optimized teamwork?
Just think about your people. It all starts with your staff. How do they want to work, and how do you actually best respond to that? So if you're coming into a meeting room, you've got to log in, you've got to plug in some cables and wires. It's all a barrier to an effective meeting. So you want to make things as frictionless as possible. Can you actually march in with your laptop and actually have a recognition system that allows you to connect immediately to a screen, allows you to connect easily and seamlessly to others, and you really just got to make their lives easy so they can focus on business. That service piece, it's incredibly powerful.
Well, Simon French of GSK, it's been fascinating to get the inside track on what is happening in your workplace. We asked the question at the start of this podcast, can office design support the optimization of teamwork? And I think the answer is a very resounding yes, if we provide the people with the right tools. In our next podcast, we'll be going to Silicon Valley to talk to one of the world's most successful office designers, Primo or Pia, about how the big tech companies are tackling teamwork. Until then, Simon, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
For more information on how coffee can help productivity in your workplace, contact Nestlé Coffee Partners or visit our Smart Coffee Hub on the link provided to download the playbook.